والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. It is a great privilege being here Thursday night and after the day of Arbaeen, being able to mourn for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, being able to be of those who attend his majalis, and being at the service of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Many of us wish that we were in Arbaeen now. Alhamdulillah, we are blessed that we do have representatives from our community that are there right now. And they are sending us photos, inshallah making dua for us. What is Arbaeen? Unfortunately, the news will not tell you that one of the most peaceful, largest gatherings of the human race that occurs annually is Arbaeen of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This is something that has been brought up more recently in times. And there's 20 to 25 million people, say 3 or 4 million of them crossing the border just from Iran, for example. This truly is powerful. It truly is a sign of sincerity and a sign of connection to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and a sign that believers want to attach themselves to Imam Hussein and learn from the lessons of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This gathering, which is 25 million people, has also been present in Southern California and throughout actually America and throughout the West. Many centers have learned that they also want to participate in this walk for Imam Hussein, as we had recently. Ahlul Bayt Masjid had a walk and many people came and gathered. And other walks, for example, this Saturday will be another walk in Los Angeles area. And this is a great opportunity for us to present Imam Hussein alayhi salam to that city that we live in, to the people that we are residing with. Because many of them want to have a role model of courage, of one who was a martyr and sacrificed everything he had for justice, for the truth. And therefore, it is very important for us to not only have these majalis, but to be able to have it outside, and many people to come to us and ask, for example, where are you? What are you guys doing? Why is everybody wearing black, for example? And you explain to them, this is Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. He was with a group of people. He was the grandson of Rasulullah. He stood against injustice. He performed what is right, even when at all odds were against him, 10,000, 30,000 people. He stood and did what is right. Many centers and many communities, they have spent money and resources in able to educate and inform others about Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. I remember around 2 years ago when I went to New York, in one of the centers there were explaining that this movement of Who is Hussein had purchased or has rented one of the signs in Times Square above the metro, above the subway, that they would put Who is Hussein in the 10 days of Muharram. And people that are going to the metro or subway would ask, Who is Hussein? Go to the website. So therefore we have this duty to present Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam, a beautiful story, beautiful lessons that mankind today needs the most. And we can share this. And Arbaeen, I believe, is one of those occurrences where many people learn about Imam Hussein. Today we see many influencers, for example, they're not even Muslim. They're attending Hussein ibn Ali, Imam Hussein alayhi salam's commemoration. If we can say salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal farajahum. Salla ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal farajahum. So therefore we see, when we look at legacy media and we don't see the coverage, is how it is needed to be able to go to and be able to know about one of the largest peaceful gatherings that are occurring now. But what is this Arbaeen? What is the 40th of Imam Hussein alayhi salam? And why is it so significant? When did it start? How come we didn't have it, for example, in this way 50 years ago, for example? How come it's something that has started maybe the last 10, 15 years? And what is our duty when it comes to Arbaeen? What are the lessons that can be learned from Arbaeen? Arbaeen, what does it mean in Arabic? At Farsi we have Chehelom, for example. In Arbaeen in Arabic means 40th. Many times we have people who have passed away, our own family members, our friends, they passed away. And we learn that, and we remember their 40th, for example, 40 days after they have passed away. Well, that's usually in the first year, when somebody just passes away. Why does Imam Hussein alayhi salam have a 40th, while maybe we remember Rasulullah, we don't have a 40th for him. We don't have a 40th for Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So therefore, we have to ask ourselves, what is the 40th and what is the significance? We can understand from different verses of Quran, first, that 40 can mean completion. 40th can mean Kamal. Do you remember the story when Prophet Musa alayhi salam met Allah? And it was supposed to be for 30 nights. And then Quran says, وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ أَرْبَعِينَ لَيْلًا. And we included 10 more, and complete and perfect became the meeting with Allah for 40 nights. So 40th year when he met Allah and he spoke to Allah, it became 40th meant completion. 40th means to be complete. Or we look at the traditions, for example, and many times 40 is used for completion. For example, when you look at someone who learns 40 hadith, it's as if he will be resurrected as one who is an alim, for example, one who remembers 40 hadith. Or to perform things for 40 nights or 40 days. Or for example, when a person, God forbid, sins and consumes intoxication and consumes haram beverages, that their salat will not be accepted for 40 days, for example. Or that person who reaches 40 years of age, that they are now complete, for example. So therefore we see throughout tradition and throughout other verses of Quran that 40 means something that is complete. Or you see in other narrations that the heavens cried for Imam Hussein for 40 days, for example. So therefore, Azadari of Imam Hussein in mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam will be complete in 40. For example, when you think about it logically too, when you do something for 1 day, how much of an effect is it going to have? You do something for 2, 3. Then when something becomes a habit for you, when something becomes, in a way, a lifestyle for you, after 40, it becomes part of your life. That is when it becomes complete. That means that you can go forward to another stage of your life. You can incorporate it, part of your lifestyle. So one, Arbaeen, we understand, means completion, to do something complete. And hopefully, I think, brothers and sisters, generally you've been mourning for 40 days and nights. And maybe after Arbaeen, you feel that it has become complete, that now you have mourned for Imam Hussein and you have gained is what there is to gain. And believe me, there's a lot to gain from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The second issue that we said we'd talk about is this, is why does Imam Hussein alayhi salam have an Arbaeen? While the Prophet does not, while Imam Ali alayhi salam does not, Imam Hassan alayhi salam does not. Well, there are many things that are particular for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That does not mean that he has a higher status than Imam Hassan or than Imam Ali or than Rasulullah. There's many things that are special to him. One of those special things, for example, is the dirt of Imam Hussein, is the soil. Right now you can go to Baqi, take some soil, for example. Go to Mashhad, take some soil from the area of there. It is Mubarak, it is Mutabarrik, because it's from Mashhad or it's from Baqi, it's from Medina, it's Mutabarrik. But does it have the same effects as the soil of Karbala? One of their great scholars by the name of Ayatollah al-Uzma Wahid al-Khurasani, he once gave a speech and says that I cannot introduce a big important marja who's today, may Allah protect him is about 104 years old. I saw a video of him crying for Hazrat Abbas at this age. And he mentions and says that if a person, when it comes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that in this stage, if a person, I cannot speak about the fada'il and virtue of Imam Hussein, but I will speak about the dirt of Imam Hussein. I will speak about the soil of Imam Hussein. I cannot speak about the shakhsiyat and the personality of Imam Hussein because it's so great and so high. I can speak about the dirt of Imam Hussein. What is this dirt? It's very interesting. You see in the narrations, this dirt is shafa for every sickness. Now there's a debate about exactly what area is the dirt of Karbala. Some say, for example, some are limited, even though all of it deserves respect. The fact that you have a torba or more from Karbala means you have to respect it. It is one of those dirt areas or that substances that you cannot, disrespect. If it's on the ground, for example, you have to respect it. It is not something that you can disrespect. But what area is it from? Some say it can be, say, for example, the city of Karbala or the area around the grave of Imam Hussein. Some say specifically it is that dirt that is right next to the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That is the special dirt of Imam Hussein. So you see, things are special to Imam Hussein. One of them is if you do sujood. And one of the best things to do, sujood of is torbat of Imam Hussein. They say it removes 7 layers of barriers between you and Allah. Or a tasbih that you might have from Imam Hussein, a tasbih that you have of Karbala, you can understand that this tasbih is doing tasbih and giving you reward even though you are not using it, for example. Or you have other cases of its shafa, for example, or for how it brings you close to Allah. This is a particular thing for the torbat of Imam Hussein. But not for other imams we have these traditions, for example. So therefore, it's possible that things are for Imam Hussein alayhi salam that are not for the other imams. And one of them is Arbaeen of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This Arbaeen that we have is in different traditions. Some, like Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, narrated that he taught us ziyarat of Arbaeen, what we just did before the Maghrib. This is one instance that there's actual a ziyarat that's Arbaeen from Imams. It is a ziyarat that comes from Imams. 2, you have that a person who does ziyarat of Imam Hussein on the 20th of Safar, for example, to perform this action itself, to go to the shrine of Imam Hussein. 3, you have the hadith from Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, that one of the signs of the believer is 5. How do we know if you're a mu'min, a true believer? One of them is 5. Few of these signs, for example, is saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim aloud. One is taking your forehead and putting it on the dirt, on the earth, for example. That is a sign of a believer. One of them is, for example, doing 51 units of prayer. That is a sign of the believer. Another sign of the believer is that he does ziyaratul arba'in. He does ziyaratul arba'in. So we have these in tradition. So therefore, arba'in, when it comes to Islamic sources, it is something that is present. It is something that is strong. But what really brought this walk about? Why did people start walking? Do we have traditions, for example, that you should make this walk from, for example, Najaf to Karbala? Such an exact tradition we don't have, but it is a compilation, this action, of so many narrations. One narration we have, for example, is every step you take towards the ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is equal to Umrah, Hajj Umrah. So obviously the farther you walk, the more steps you take, for example. So walking farther and walking towards the shrine, it is rewardable. Just how we have our imams, for example, sometimes they would do the Hajj, Mashiyan, they would do the Hajj walking. Not riding an animal, they would walk into Hajj, for example, into Mecca. So therefore walking and going to specific places of ziyarat or religious places by itself is important. 2, respecting the zawar. The zawar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in tradition are very respectable. We have in some of the traditions that they will perform the zawar of Imam Hussein that does Ziyat Ashura. He says, Allah give me al-maqam al-mahmud in Ziyat Ashura, you say. What is al-maqam al-mahmud? What is the praiseworthy station? What does that mean? It means shafa'at, give me intercession, because this term has been used for Rasulullah. In the tafsir it says, al-maqam al-mahmud means to be able to intercede. So the Zar asks, oh Allah, give me that maqam that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had. What maqam does he have? What position does he have? The position of interceding, to taking others to heaven. When the Za'ir can take people to heaven with God's permission, just like the Salaha can, the Shuhada can, does that Za'ir and person who is visiting Imam Hussein not deserve to be respected? Yes, he has to be respected. So therefore you provide him food. Another action of this reason why is because Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they took the same masir, or they took the same path. Even though they took in a different direction, for example. They took it from Karbala to Kufa, but we take this path and we do the opposite from Najaf to Karbala. But we know that this path, Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, and the family of the Prophet and the family of Imam Hussein alayhi salam were thirsty. They were hungry. So therefore, many of the Zawar want to make sure, and many of those who have mawkibs and stations, they want to make sure that those that are performing Arbaeen are well fed, or taken care of, they're in shade, for example, so that the history does not repeat itself. The people are not thirsty again, people are not hungry again, for example. So when you take all these narrations together, the importance of feeding others, khayrakum from the Rasulullah, khayrakum man at'amat ta'am, the best of you is he who gives food to others. All these traditions set up the situation, and after the removal of Saddam, you see that the Shia were empowered in Iraq, and after years of repression and not being allowed to perform this Arbaeen, not being allowed to have majalis like this, you see it was an explosion that happened in Iraq, and the lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam began to perform the Arbaeen, as we said, a compilation of these narrations, and how important it is of itself, for Imam Hassan Askari salam to visit Imam Hussein in Arbaeen. Therefore, this came about. It spread there, and then alhamdulillah, it spread to the US, it spread to different continents, and today we see many people are performing this julus, or performing this walking for Imam Hussein, and it's a great opportunity to show how much we love Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But one of the key important factors that we must learn when it comes to Arbaeen is that the importance of ziyarat. What is this ziyarat that is so important? Why is ziyarat in our Shia tradition so important that everyone says, I wish to go to Karbala, for example. I wish, I can go to Mashhad of Imam Rida. Why is ziyarat so important? To say this, I want to, begin with one of the traditions that I'll share tonight. As long as you give me a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajin faraj. If you ever see me falling asleep, just give me a salawat, I'll wake up, inshallah. Say another salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajin faraj. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam beautifully says in the tradition, Al-awsiya'uhum abwabullah. The successors are the gates of Allah. The imams are the gates of Allah. Every building has a door, for example, has a gate. You yourself, when you want to enter the home, for example, has a gate. But in order to enter Tawheed and monotheism, you need to have doors. You need to enter properly. And the proper way to enter religion are the imams. Why do you think the imams are the proper way to enter religion? We're going to explain. Azza wa Jal, allati yu'ta minha. Then Imam Sadiq says something very high, and I want you to think about this sentence. What does this sentence even mean? Do we truly even understand it? وَلَوْلَاهُمْ مَا عُرِفَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. If it wasn't for the awsiya and the successors of Rasulullah, if it wasn't for the imams, Allah would not be known. Allah will not be known. But what do you mean? Only the Shia know God? What do you mean? So many people believe in God. What does this mean? What does the tradition mean? I'll say it again. The imams, the awsiya, are the abwabullah, they're the doors, the gates. Enter through the gates. 2, if it wasn't for these awsiya, God wouldn't be known. What does this mean? 1, we can understand it this way. that everything has a sabil and path. Everything has a correct way. If you want to do something right, there's a method for everything. Do you ever try to, for example, repair something by yourself and you're not a professional? Usually you cause a disaster. Maybe the women know this better. When husbands try to save some money, for example, instead of bringing a plumber or electrician, they end up trying to do things themselves. And unfortunately, some people, they have inna lillah, inna ilayhi rajiun. They end up positive, negative. They don't know what it is, for example, and they pass away. Or they try to mix plumbing with electricity and water, and electricity don't mix. They're two different professions. So therefore, everything needs a profession. Everything needs to be done correctly. How can I enter religion? Is it something I could just make up myself and make a religion? Or do I need to learn religion from the true sources? Well, the imams are the true sources, because there's so many questions. Yes, everyone believes in God. This is part of our innate nature. But how many questions do we have about God? They came to Imam Rida alayhi salam at that time. Sif lana rabbak. Explain to us how Allah is. They were confused. What are some questions about God? One, can we see God or not? For example, some people would ask. Is God like us or not? What is the essence of God? What are the attributes of God? Will we see God with our eyes in heaven or not? For example, these are just a few questions. Who is going to explain to us how God is and how God is? And how beautiful Quran says, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." Nothing is like Allah. How much our scholars say, or how Imam Ali alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha says, that the pure Tawheed is nafyu sifatu an. The pure monotheism is taking and removing the attributes from Allah. What do you mean? I thought Allah has so many attributes. Well, what kind of attributes? The attributes of creation. The attributes that we have, the attributes of limitation. So therefore, the imams need to teach us who God is, who isn't. Once it's interesting that one of our scholars came to, I believe it's Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, he came to a conference about religion. And there presented was a Jewish scholar, a Christian scholar, and a Muslim Shia scholar. And this is not a joke, this is a true story. So therefore, they're asking and saying, how can you understand who God is? The Christian scholar at that time was a philosopher and says, you can understand God by logic, by philosophy, by the mind. The mind is sufficient to understand God. You do not need anything else. Think about Allah. Think of how the philosophers think. That's Allah, that's God. I mean, not Allah, you said God. The Jewish scholar was a person of scripture. He says, no, you need the scriptures. You need to see, for example, what the Prophet said. You need to see, for example, maybe what Prophet Musa alayhi salam said. And therefore, you will understand the God of Prophet Moses. You need the scripture, you need the books. And now what is the answer right now? What do you think? Which one is correct? A or B so far? The scholars, for example, say which one? God by the mind or God introduced by the prophets? Which one is right? Then the Shia scholar, Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, said none of these, or actually both of these are correct. He says in the initial state, you understand God by the mind. Initially, you understand God by the mind. You know He exists. You know that He is necessary existence. You know we are contingent existence. We are in need. We know that. But exactly what attributes He has, exactly how He is like, then you turn to Scripture to advance your belief and knowledge of God, to advance it. And therefore, what we have today of monotheism and Tawheed, we are in debt to the Imams. They taught us this. If you study Kalam and theology, how many different works are there that they explain God in a different way? How many made-up narrations there are, for example, in some of the Sunni scriptures that God is in this way which He isn't. So therefore, to understand God, we need to have Ahlul Bayt, right? So therefore, this goes back to ziyarat, and we said that ziyarat is important. Ziyarat and visitation of Imams is important because al-awsiya are the abwab Allah. They are the gates of Allah, gateway to God. And if they did not exist, Allah would not be known in this way. Now I'm going to give a little bit more in-depth definition of this, why ziyarat is important. And I'm trying to say that ziyarat and visitation of Imam is a pathway I have to take to Tawheed, to monotheism. And this is this. When Imam Rida alayhi salam, now some have, we usually as in the Persian culture, we take the last day of the month of Safar to be the shahadat of Imam Rida alayhi salam. But some take, a few days ago, a few days before Arbaeen to be the shahadat of Imam Rida alayhi salam. Now, Imam Rida alayhi salam, or Imam Riza alayhi salam is known as Alim Ali Muhammad. This is what he's known for. The scholar of the family of the Prophet. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And he was entering one of the very important cities of the time, which was Nishabur. Maybe some of you visited or passed by Nishabur on your drive to Mashhad. Nishabur was known for what at that time? Was known to be a scholarly city, was known to have many of the muhaddithin during that time. So therefore, Imam Rida alayhi salam is the Imam of the age. But there are Sunni scholars there. They don't recognize him as the Imam. So they ask him to share with us one hadith, share with us one saying. Now, thousands of hadith were known at that time. What hadith is Imam Rida alayhi salam going to share that they do not know? Which hadith, which saying is he going to do so? One, he started with the sanad, because in hadith, it's not like Quran. Quran is qatiyu sudur. We know everything that is in Quran, Allah says. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. But hadith, we cannot swear and say every hadith is true. Some hadith we know that are mutawatir, we can swear they're true, like hadith qadir, for example. We can swear it's true. But hadith needs to be verified. So Imam Rida alayhi salam begins with the sanad. And a true hadith, a sahih hadith, is one which the narrators are all reliable. But not only does he give the chain of narrations reliable, he gives imams as the chain of narration. He says, my father, which is Imam Qadim alayhi salam, narrated from his father, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, continued all the way to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to Imam Ali alayhi salam, and to the Prophet. And this is the golden chain narration. Very beautiful narration, but I'm giving you context. What hadith is Imam Rida alayhi salam going to give that all these muhaddithin, which is like the hawza of that time, is Nishabur, what hadith is he going to give to all these people? He gives a hadith that is a hadith Qudsi that they all knew possibly. He gives the hadith at that time that Kalamatul la ilaha illallah hisni faman dakhala hisni amina min adhabi. The word la ilaha illallah is God says, is the fortress, is my fortress. Whoever enters my fortress, he will be saved from my punishment. This is something that everyone knows. Tawheed saves us, not something very new. But then he says something that here it causes people's head to spin. Because again, he's addressing a lot of the Sunni muhaddithin and Sunni scholars. Does anyone here remember what Imam Rida alayhi salam says to them? It's very famous. He says to them, Bishartaha wa shurutaha, Bishurutaha wa ana min shurutaha. The caravan is about to leave. He says, wait a minute. This so far, everything I said, except for the chain of narrations, everything I said, possibly they knew. But this condition of Tawheed that he gives, that this La ilaha illallah that you give is not accepted. It is not accepted without its conditions. And I am of the conditions of this. Now people say, oh, now they understand Imam Rida alayhi salam as an infallible Imam. Not just the scholar of the time, not the best, for example, that he is an infallible Imam that must be followed, that must be obeyed. That is the condition of Tawheed. What does that mean? It's very interesting when you think of this. It means that you cannot get to know Allah without Imam Rida alayhi salam. Your Tawheed is not accepted. What happens if somebody does salat without wudu? What happens? Don't be like that guy that says, for example, he did 40 years of salat and then make up salat. Then he says, I'm going to do 40 years of make up wudu, for example. Don't be like that person. So therefore, Imam Rida alayhi salam is teaching us that for a person to reach Allah, he needs to go through wilayat and ziyarat. And that means to know God in terms of the mystic, for example, ma'rifat, and understanding of God. You have to go to the gates, and you have to go to the abwab, where the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. That is where the ma'rifatullah is. And that is why some of the urafa, like for example, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Qazi Tabatabai, he was asking Allah, give me your knowledge, give me your true ma'rifat, make me an arif. And he was coming back from the shrine of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. And he's coming back, and then he's informed, he says, go back to that shrine, the shrine of Hazrat Abbas, because whoever we gave him this ma'rifat of Allah, he got it from that shrine. He got it from that shrine. So this ziyarat has that gate, is the gateway for us to reach Allah. When you look at different ziyarats that we have, ziyarat Ashura, for example, ziyarat Arbaeen, you see inside of it is mystery. Inside of it is something that we cannot explain. I'm going to give you a few stories about how mystical these ziyarats are, and how sometimes we don't take them, how it is important, and how they really should be. During the time of Ayatollah Shirazi, who has the fatwa of the tobacco and banning the tobacco in Samarra, and Ayatollah Fisharaki, two great ulama, there began to be a sickness that was affecting the people of Samarra, because there was a time period where the Hausa was moved to Samarra, and actually it is a type of studying. They say, for example, the Hausa of Samarra is a little different than what you have, for example, the Hausa of Najaf. At that time, cholera, or what we say in Farsi, vaba, spread. And people were dying left and right. They didn't have the medication that we have today. They didn't know what to do. And it was contaminating the entire city. Ayatollah Fisharaki says, do you accept me as being a mujtahid? He said, yes. He says, I give a hukm. Hukm means that now it is wajib upon everyone. It's different than the fatwa. Fatwa, you're doing bayan, al-hukm shari al-kulli, the general rulings of Allah. But he says, do you accept me as a mujtahid? I give a hukm, meaning it is wajib upon everyone to recite ziyarat Ashura for 10 nights and give the reward of it to the mother of Imam Mahdi Ajallah Ta'ala Farajah Sharif, Hazrat Narjis Khatu. They begin to recite ziyarat Ashura. 1 night, 2 nights passes, and they see that the disease, the sickness stops. And therefore it doesn't even take 10 nights. Then even the Ahlul Sunnah at that time, I have one of the books we have here is about Ziyarat Ashura. It's about 60 stories about it. The masjid has a copy of it. You can look at it right now. 60 stories about how effective Ziyarat Ashura is. Then Ahlul Sunnah of that time were coming and saying, what are the Shia doing? How come they're not getting sick anymore? And they began reciting Ziyarat Ashura with the lands and everything that existed there. And they said everyone in Samarra became protected. This is one of the miracles that we said when we talk about ziyarat and the importance of it, ziyarat Arbaeen, visiting Imam Hussein. We say the importance of ziyarat Ashura, it has these effects. I'm going to give you another story which is also in that book that the masjid has. Everyone here heard of Al-Nabi Amini, one of the great scholars, one of those who has defended Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in the book Al-Qadir. In this book, he spent his entire life being in the library. Sometimes he wouldn't use the restroom so that he can spend the night in the libraries to defend Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in his books, Al-Ghadir. He would say, lock the library, I will be there till morning. So he passes away, and this story is from his eldest son. They see Al-Nabi Amini in dream. His son is saying, he asks his father, for example, what happened to you? Were you saved, for example? How did you get saved? What happened? Very important for us to know. And his son narrates and says that my father, I asked him, what saved you? This book, Al-Qadir? Or for example, this library that you founded? He founded a library, for example. Books, knowledge, did it help you? And he says to his son, recitation of Ziyarat Ashura helped me. Visiting Imam Hussein alayhi salam helped me. The Ziyarat of Imam Hussein. And he mentioned to him, as long as you're alive, recite Ziyarat Ashura. Make it wajib on yourself in the dream. He's saying, make it wajib on yourself, recite it every day. And then he mentions, that we cannot go to Iraq during the war. This is the time period we cannot go from Iran, we cannot go to Iraq. Then he tells them, go to the majalis of Imam Hussein. Go to the places of remembrance of Imam Hussein is as if you have gone to the ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What helped Allama Amini with all his knowledge, with all his sacrifice, was the ziyarat Ashura and visiting Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Question, does that mean that I shouldn't care about knowledge or scholars are not important? No, that is one station that they ask us. There will be other stations in the hereafter. There will be stations about, Haqqun Nas. There will be stations where knowledge will be asked about knowledge, for example. There will be stations, for example, how we treated others and how we worshipped Allah. There's other, stations. There's 50 different stations in the Day of Judgment. In each one, there are different places where people are asked. But at that time, what was important, especially right when he died, was visiting Imam Hussein and doing ziyarat Ashura. So there are other things I was going to say about Imam Hussein's Arbaeen and many lessons we could learn. We'll save that inshallah for other nights. But to recap what I said, one, ziyarat Arbaeen is specific for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We don't have traditions for Prophet and Imams. But many things are specific for Imam Hussein, that is okay. Two, Arbaeen means completion. We can understand it to mean completion. So therefore, when we do Ziyarat Arbaeen, is 40 days and nights that we've cried and we have completed our azadari for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Three, Ziyarat Arbaeen is an international event that we are blessed with, that we have to promote more. And I thank all of you that you have been attending the julus and those that have been walking for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This is something very needed. And the last is that ziyarat of the Imams is so significant because we view as the prophets and the Imams and the awsiya as gateways to Allah. And the tradition says, if it was not for us, the awsiya, Allah would not be known. If you want to know Allah, come to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. If you want to worship Allah, come to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They are the path, inshallah. We can now come to the musibat of Arbaeen and talk about one of the first visitors of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Who visited Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Arbaeen? Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari and Atiyah, two great individuals. Jabir ibn Abdullah, for those who do not know, had a very specific knowledge of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He is the first one to come to his grave, and it mentions that on the 40th he performed the ziyarat, but is someone who was Imam Hussein's friend since Imam Hussein was born. He was present when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was born, and Allah, usually someone that has a newborn being born, usually such a person is happy. Many of you had children, you're happy. But Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was born, because she was informed that this newborn would be killed, this newborn would be killed thirsty, she was saddened. Allah gave her a gift in this hadith, which is called Lawh Fatima, gave it to Lady Fatima alayhi salam as a gift for Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam being born. It's a great hadith. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari took and wrote and transcribed Lawh Fatima that we have today. So I want to show you Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari was there when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was born. The companions were there when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was young. And Rasulullah is making sujood. And the books say Rasulullah prolongs his sujood. He is the seal of the messengers. People are wondering, why is Rasulullah making such a long sujood? The narrator says either Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein was on top of Rasulullah while he's doing sujood. They come to Rasulullah, the Prophet, and say, did a new verse come? Was there revelation? Why was your sujood so long? He says, mentions that it was Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein was on top, and I did not want to harm him. I did not want to bother him. So Jabir ibn Yazid al-Juhfi is seeing Imam Hussein alayhi salam in this way, that Rasulullah stops his, prolongs his sujood for him. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari is there when the Christians challenge the Muslims in Mubahala and says, bring your sons. And he brings Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. Some say, carrying Imam Hussein alayhi salam and taking Imam Hassan with his hand. He saw all of this. When he says, you're the chief of the youth of paradise, he was there. Now I want you to understand what happens when Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari visits Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and this much marifat he knows of Imam Hussein. He comes and Atiyah takes him. Some say that the eyes of Jabir was dim. He cannot see. And slowly they take him, after performing ghusl, take him to the grave of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. It says he came to the Farat and he did the ghusl. Then it mentions, he said he changed his clothes, he put on perfume, he took short steps. Atiyah took him shortly to see where the beloved grandson or the beloved son of Rasulullah is. Hatta idha dana min al-qabr, until he came close to the grave, he asked, place my hands on the grave of Imam Hussein. Place my hands so I can touch the soil where Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam is buried. But Jabir could not take it. His heart, his soul is with the soul of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The Maqtal says, فَخَرَّ عَلَى الْقَبْرِ مَغْشِيًّا عَلَيْهِ. Jabir faints on the grave of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. He cannot take it because under here is the beloved grandson of Rasulullah. Under here is the chest that had the ma'rifat of Allah. Under here are the arms that were so gracious and so benevolent to the people. Atiyah comes here, and as you know, maybe some of you have seen someone who has fainted. What do you do when someone faints? You take some water and you sprinkle it on him. There it is says that Jabir sprinkled water on him. فَرَشَشْتُ عَلَيْهِ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْمَاءِ. He sprayed some water upon Jabir. Jabir wakes up, فَلَمَّا أَفَاقَ. He woke up, he said, Ya Hussein, 3 times. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, 3 times. And then he says, قَالَ حَبِيبٌ لَا يَجِيبُ حَبِيبِ. He speaks to Imam Hussein and says, my friend, my beloved, you do not speak to your friend. Jabir is here. I have seen you as a child. I have seen you as a baby grow up. I know what you went through. You are my friend. Why do you not talk to me? And he says, I know why. وَقَدْ شُحِتَتْ أَوْجَاكَ عَلَى أَثْبَاجِكَ. When your veins are not on your shoulders. وَفُرَّقَ بَيْنَ بَدَنِكَ وَرَأْسِكَ. I know why, Hussein ibn Ali, you do not answer is because your head has been severed from your body. Inna lillah, inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam al-Hussein alayhi salam.